My son-in-law called my mother's efforts stupid. Those words cut deeper than any knife ever could. I still hear them echoing in my mind at 3 in the morning when sleep refuses to come. You know, you wouldn't believe the nerve of some people until you live it yourself. Today, I'm going to tell you something that might just make your blood boil. Stick around, because there's a lot to unpack and you might find a piece of your own story here. This isn't easy for me to share, but if my story can help even one person feel less alone, then it's worth opening these old wounds. I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button, not for me, but so this message can reach someone out there who desperately needs to hear it, someone who thinks they're the only one going through this kind of heartache. My name is Eleanor Whitman, and I'm 73 years old. I live in a modest 2-bedroom house in Queens, New York, the same house where I raised my daughter Sarah. The walls are cream-colored, though they've yellowed a bit over the decades. The kitchen still has the same green and white checkered tiles I installed with my late husband Robert back in 1982. There's a crack in the corner near the stove that I never bothered to fix because Robert always said it gave the place character. I've held on to that crack like a lifeline to him. Every morning, I wake up at 5:30. Not because I want to, but because my body simply won't let me sleep any longer. My knees creak when I swing my legs out of bed, and my back protests as I straighten up. I shuffle to the kitchen in my worn pink slippers, the ones with the hole forming near the left toe that I keep meaning to replace but never do. The linoleum floor is cold even through the fabric. I put the kettle on, an old stainless steel one that whistles like a distant train, and stand by the window while I wait for it to boil. From that window, I can see Mrs. Chen's garden next door. She grows the most beautiful roses, deep red ones that bloom even in October. Sometimes I wonder if she knows how much joy those flowers bring me, how they're often the only beautiful thing I see all day. The morning light filters through the thin curtains, casting shadows that dance across the kitchen counter where I've set out my pills. 7 different bottles. When did I become a person who needs 7 pills just to function? I make my tea, Earl Grey, always Earl Grey, and sit at the small kitchen table. The chair wobbles slightly. I've meant to fix that too, but who am I kidding? I don't know how to fix chairs. Robert did all that. Now the house slowly falls apart around me, just like I am, piece by piece, nail by nail. I drink my tea from a chipped mug that says World's Best Mom, a Mother's Day gift from Sarah when she was 12. She made it herself in art class. I can still see her little fingerprints in the glaze if I look close enough. It was a Thursday morning, unseasonably warm for late September, when everything truly started to unravel. I was sitting at that same kitchen table, had just finished my second cup of tea, when my phone buzzed. A text message from Sarah. My heart did what it always does when I hear from her. A little flutter of hope, of connection, of maybe today will be different. I put on my reading glasses, the ones with the purple frames that Sarah said made me look hip, though I'm certain she was just being kind. The message was short, too short. Mom, we're having a family dinner Sunday at Marco's new restaurant. Kids are excited. Talk soon. Marco, my son-in-law, Marco Delgado, the man who had entered our lives 5 years ago like a storm surge, all charm and big promises and that smile that showed too many teeth. Sarah had been 41 when she met him, divorced from her first husband Tom, working double shifts as a nurse at Mount Sinai. She'd been worn down, vulnerable, and Marco had swooped in with his talk of investments and opportunities and a better life. They were married within 8 months. I stared at that text message. Marco's new restaurant. When had he opened a restaurant? Why didn't I know about this? And why did the message feel so distant, so perfunctory? I read it 3 more times, searching for warmth, for an actual invitation, for those words that would make me feel included rather than merely informed. They weren't there. I set the phone down on the checkered tablecloth, the same one I'd used for 20 years, with its faded yellow sunflowers that used to be bright and cheerful. My hands were shaking slightly. I told myself it was the caffeine, but I knew better. It was the familiar ache of being an afterthought, of being the box you check because you have to, not because you want to. Sunday came. I spent Saturday preparing, because that's what I do. I went to the small savings I keep in a coffee tin in my bedroom closet. Money I'd been setting aside from my Social Security checks, $20 here, $30 there. I counted out $150. It was money I'd been saving for a new winter coat, but family comes first. It always has. I put it in an envelope, crisp bills that I'd gotten from the bank, and wrote, "For Marco's success," on the front in my careful handwriting. I chose my outfit with care. My navy blue dress, the one with the pearl buttons that Sarah had always complimented. I pressed it carefully, watching the steam rise from the iron. I polished my good shoes, the black ones with the modest heel. I even put on the pearl necklace Robert had given me for our 30th anniversary. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman trying desperately to look worthy of inclusion, and the sadness of that realization made my eyes sting. At 4 o'clock, I called Sarah. The phone rang 6 times before she answered, and I could hear noise in the background, laughter, music, the clatter of dishes. "Mom? Can't really talk now. We're literally walking into the restaurant." "Oh," I said, gripping the phone tighter. "I was just calling to see what time you wanted me there." There was a pause. A long, terrible pause that seemed to suck all the air out of my kitchen. "Mom, didn't you get my text? It's kind of a soft opening thing. Very small. Marco's nervous about capacity and—" "Your text said family dinner," I interrupted, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "You said the kids were excited." "Right. Yeah. But it's complicated. The reservation system isn't working right, and Marco really can't handle any more stress right now. You understand?" I didn't understand. I didn't understand at all. But I said, "Of course, honey. Of course I understand. Tell Marco congratulations from me." "Will do, Mom. Love you. Gotta go." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, still dressed in my navy blue dress with the pearl buttons, still wearing Robert's anniversary pearls, still clutching that envelope with $150 inside. The house was absolutely silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a siren somewhere in the neighborhood. I didn't cry. Not then. I've learned that crying doesn't help, doesn't change anything. Instead, I carefully removed my pearls, unbuttoned my dress, changed back into my everyday clothes, a pair of gray slacks and a soft pink sweater that's pilled at the elbows. I put the envelope back in the coffee tin. I made myself a simple dinner of scrambled eggs and toast, though I barely tasted it. Later that evening, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. I shouldn't have. I knew I shouldn't have. But I did anyway, because hope is a stupid, stubborn thing that refuses to die even when it should. And there they were. Photos, dozens of them. Sarah, Marco, my grandchildren Emma and Jackson, Marco's parents, Marco's 2 brothers and their families, even Sarah's ex-husband Tom with his new wife. All of them at Marco's restaurant, smiling at a long table decorated with white roses and candles. The caption read, "Family means everything. So grateful to celebrate this new chapter with the people who matter most." I stared at that phrase, the people who matter most. I read it over and over until the words stopped making sense, until they were just sounds in my head, meaningless syllables that had the power to crack my chest open and expose the raw, bleeding thing inside. I wasn't there. I wasn't one of the people who mattered most. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, at the water stain that had been there since the roof leaked 3 winters ago. I thought about all the times I'd been there for Sarah. When she was born, tiny and wrinkled and perfect, and Robert and I had stayed up all night just watching her breathe. When she had pneumonia at age 7 and I'd slept on the floor next to her bed for a week. When she'd gotten her heart broken by Danny Richards in high school and I'd held her while she sobbed into my shoulder. When she'd gone through her divorce from Tom and I'd taken out a loan I was still paying off, to help her with legal fees and to make the down payment on her condo. When Marco had come into the picture, I'd welcomed him. I'd invited him to Sunday dinners, asked about his work, listened to his endless stories about his plans to make it big in the restaurant business. When he'd proposed to Sarah, I'd contributed $5,000 toward the wedding, money I'd pulled from the small life insurance policy Robert had left me. $5,000 I'd intended to use for a bathroom renovation, because the shower had started leaking and the tiles were loose. But family comes first, I'd told myself. Family always comes first. After the wedding, Marco had asked to borrow money, $12,000 for his investment opportunity. He'd been so persuasive, so confident, promising to pay me back within 6 months with interest. Sarah had looked at me with such hope in her eyes, such belief in this man she'd married. How could I say no? I'd taken out a personal loan, using my house as collateral. The payments were $270 a month, and they made my budget so tight I'd stopped buying fresh fruit and started shopping at the discount grocery store where everything is just about to expire. That was 3 years ago. I'd never seen a penny of that money again. When I gently mentioned it to Marco after a year had passed, he'd looked at me with such wounded surprise, such theatrical hurt, and said, "Eleanor, I thought that was a gift. I thought you wanted to help us build our future. I mean, Sarah's your daughter. Don't you want her to be happy?" And just like that, he'd made me feel guilty for wanting my own money back. He'd made me feel small and petty and selfish. Sarah had been standing right there, and she'd said nothing. She'd just looked away, uncomfortable, and changed the subject. The memory of it burned in my chest as I lay there in the dark. I turned onto my side, pulling the thin blanket up to my chin. The house creaked and settled around me, all the familiar sounds of a place growing old, just like me. I wondered when I'd become so easy to overlook. When had I transformed from Sarah's mother into this optional person, this inconvenient obligation? I must have finally fallen asleep because I woke with a start at 2:30 in the morning, my heart pounding. I'd been dreaming about Robert. In the dream, he was sitting in the kitchen, young and healthy like he'd been before the cancer, and he was looking at me with such sadness. "Eleanor," he'd said, "when are you going to stop letting them do this to you?" I'd tried to answer him, but no words would come out, and then I'd woken up. The house was cold. I got up and wrapped Robert's old cardigan around my shoulders, the brown one that still smelled faintly of his cologne, even after all these years. I went to the kitchen and stood by the window, looking out at the dark street, at the street lights casting orange pools on the sidewalk, at Mrs. Chen's roses barely visible in the shadows. And standing there in the cold kitchen at 2:30 in the morning, wrapped in a dead man's cardigan, I let myself acknowledge something I'd been avoiding for a long time. This wasn't new. This pattern of being dismissed, of being used, of being pushed aside, it had been building for years. Ever since Marco entered our lives, I'd felt myself becoming smaller in Sarah's world, less important, less valued. But I'd convinced myself I was imagining it, being too sensitive, expecting too much. But you can't imagine being excluded from a family dinner. You can't be too sensitive about being erased from a celebration. Those are facts, hard and real and impossible to explain away. The next morning, I went through my usual routine, but everything felt different, like I was moving through water. I made my tea, I took my pills, I sat at the wobbling table. But I kept hearing Marco's words from 2 years ago, words I'd tried so hard to forget. It had been Thanksgiving. I'd spent 3 days preparing, cooking Robert's mother's recipes, the herb-stuffed turkey, the sweet potato casserole with the pecan topping, the cranberry sauce made from scratch. I'd set the table with the good china, the set my mother had given me as a wedding present. I'd bought a new tablecloth, cream-colored with embroidered autumn leaves. I'd wanted everything to be perfect. Marco had arrived with Sarah and the kids, and he'd immediately started complaining. The house was too warm. The TV was too quiet for him to watch the game. Did I have any beer? Not that kind, the imported kind. He'd wandered into the kitchen where I was basting the turkey, and he'd looked at all my preparations with this smirk on his face. "You really went all out, huh, Eleanor?" he'd said, and there was something mocking in his tone. "All this fuss for what? We could have just ordered from that new place on Austin Street. This is kind of stupid, don't you think? All this effort for one meal?" I'd frozen, the basting brush dripping in my hand. "These are family recipes," I'd said quietly. "Robert's mother taught me. I make them every year." "Yeah, well, Robert's dead," Marco had said, shrugging. "Maybe it's time to move on. Sarah says you're always stuck in the past. It's actually kind of sad." He'd walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing there with my dead husband's mother's recipes, feeling like everything I'd done, everything I valued, had just been dismissed as stupid, as pathetic, as sad. I'd served dinner with shaking hands. Sarah had noticed something was wrong, had asked if I was okay. I'd smiled and said I was fine, just tired from cooking. And we'd eaten the meal I'd spent 3 days preparing, and Marco had spent the whole time on his phone, barely touching his food, occasionally making comments about how dry the turkey was, or how his mother made better stuffing. That had been the first time he'd openly disrespected me. But it wasn't the last. There had been other moments, other little cuts. Like when I'd offered to babysit Emma and Jackson, and Marco had said, "Actually, Eleanor, we found a service. Professional childcare. Nothing personal, but we just feel better with trained people." Or when I'd suggested a weekend trip to the cabin upstate that Robert and I used to take Sarah to every summer, and Marco had laughed and said, "Are you kidding? That old dump? We're taking the kids to Disney World. You know, somewhere fun, somewhere actually worth their time." Each time, Sarah had been silent. She'd look uncomfortable. Sometimes she'd touch Marco's arm as if to gentle him, but she never defended me. She never said, "Marco, that's my mother you're talking to." She never said, "That's not okay." She just let it happen, over and over, until I started to believe that maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was too sensitive, too stuck in the past, too much of everything Marco said I was. I started keeping a journal after that Thanksgiving. Not every day, but when things happened that hurt. I bought a simple notebook from the drugstore, one with a blue cover and lined pages. I'd write down what was said, what happened, how it made me feel. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was creating drama where there was none. But the journal filled up, page after page of small rejections, casual cruelties, moments when I was made to feel less than. Research shows that only 1 in 24 cases of elder abuse is ever reported. I'd read that somewhere, maybe in an AARP magazine in my doctor's waiting room. I'd thought about that statistic a lot. Did what was happening to me count as abuse? It wasn't physical. Marco never hit me. But there was something violent about the way he dismissed me, the way he made me feel worthless. There was something cruel about how he'd taken my daughter from me. Not quickly or obviously, but slowly, subtly, until one day I woke up and realized I barely existed in her life anymore. For years, I'd convinced myself that they needed me, that I had to stay, had to keep trying, had to keep being the bigger person. Family is supposed to stick together, right? That's what I'd been taught. That's what Robert and I had believed. You don't give up on family. You forgive. You endure. You love them through the hard times. But somewhere along the way, my endurance had turned into something else. It had become a kind of prison I'd built for myself, with bars made of obligation and guilt, and the desperate fear of being alone. I was dependent on the hope that things would get better, that Sarah would see what was happening, that Marco would change, that my grandchildren would remember me the way Sarah had once loved me. My dependence was like a pair of blinders, making me believe that if I just hung on a little longer, if I just gave a little more, if I just accepted a little more disrespect, things would change for the better. It's funny how we lie to ourselves, thinking we're doing it for the greater good, when really, we're just too scared to face the truth. And the truth was terrifying. The truth was that I'd given up pieces of myself year after year, sacrifice after sacrifice, until I didn't recognize the woman I'd become. Let me tell you about those sacrifices. Dignity? I'd left that at the door years ago. It's amazing what we put up with for the sake of family. I'd endured humiliation after humiliation, always the one to forgive and forget, thinking it was the mature thing to do. But every time I swallowed my pride, it left a bitter taste in my mouth that never quite went away. There was the time Marco had borrowed my car, my beloved old Honda Civic that Robert had bought for me in 2004, and returned it 3 days late with an empty gas tank and a dent in the rear bumper. When I'd pointed out the dent, he'd shrugged and said, "It's an old car anyway, Eleanor. What do you care? You barely go anywhere." No apology, no offer to fix it, just that casual dismissal that made me feel foolish for even mentioning it. There was the Christmas when I'd bought thoughtful, carefully chosen gifts for Emma and Jackson. Spending money I really didn't have on the art supplies Emma had mentioned wanting and the science kit Jackson had shown me in a catalog. Marco had glanced at them, said, "Huh, well that's nice, I guess," and then handed the kids his gifts, the latest gaming system and 2 new iPads. My gifts had been set aside, forgotten in the excitement, and later I'd found them in Sarah's coat closet, still wrapped, gathering dust. There was my 71st birthday. Sarah had called in the morning to wish me happy birthday, and I'd been so pleased, so grateful for even that small acknowledgement. Then she'd mentioned they were all going to see a Broadway show that evening, something Marco had gotten tickets for. "The kids have been begging to see Hamilton forever," she'd said. I'd waited, hoped, for her to invite me. But she hadn't. She just said, "We'll celebrate your birthday next weekend, okay, Mom?" Next weekend never came. No celebration, no cake, no acknowledgement that the day had even mattered. But perhaps the worst sacrifice, the one that still makes my stomach turn when I think about it, was what happened with Robert's medals. Robert had been in the army, served 2 tours in Vietnam. He'd come home with 3 medals, which he'd kept in a velvet box in his dresser drawer. He'd been a humble man, never talked much about his service, but I knew those medals meant something to him. After he died, I'd kept them safe, displayed in a small shadow box in the living room. Marco had noticed them one day, about a year into his marriage to Sarah. "Those are cool," he'd said. "Military stuff, right? Vintage. I bet those are worth something." A few weeks later, he'd asked if he could borrow them. He had a friend who collected military memorabilia, he said. Just wanted to show them off. I'd been uncomfortable, but Sarah had said, "Mom, it's fine. Marco will take good care of them. He knows they're important." I never saw them again. When I asked about them months later, Marco had looked confused, then annoyed. "Oh, those? Yeah, I think they're in storage somewhere. I'll look for them." He never did. I'd asked twice more, then stopped because the look of irritation on his face, the heavy sigh of exasperation, made me feel like I was being unreasonable. Those medals, Robert's service, his sacrifice, his memory, reduced to something misplaced in storage somewhere, if they even still existed. The weight of these accumulated indignities pressed down on me like a physical thing. I started having trouble sleeping through the night. I'd wake up at odd hours, my mind racing through conversations I should have had, boundaries I should have set, moments when I should have said no, but said yes instead. My doctor asked if I was depressed. I told her I was fine, just getting older, sleeping less. She prescribed pills. I took them. They didn't help. It was a pattern, really. Little things here and there that didn't make sense until they all clicked together like pieces of a horrible puzzle. Like when they'd go out for dinners or family outings, and I wasn't invited. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe they forgot. Silly, I know. But when you spot the same excuse on repeat, you begin to see the truth. It was last minute, Mom. The kids just wanted it to be us this time. It wasn't really your kind of thing. We thought you'd be tired. The restaurant had limited seating. It was more of a Marco's family thing. Excuse after excuse. each one reasonable on its own, but together forming a clear picture of deliberate exclusion. It wasn't oversight, it was intentional, a systematic erasure of my place in their lives. I started noticing other things too. How Sarah's responses to my texts had become shorter, more perfunctory. How my calls often went to voicemail. How when we did talk, it was brief, hurried. Sarah always having somewhere else to be, someone else to talk to. How I'd hear about events and milestones through Facebook instead of from her directly. Jackson's soccer tournament, Emma's honor roll achievement, their weekend trip to the Hamptons. I'd see the photos online and feel like a ghost haunting my own family, able to observe but never to participate. Present in memory, but absent from reality. The comments from other people, friends, other family members, would say things like, "Such a beautiful family," or "You guys are living your best life." And I'd want to comment too, to say something, to remind them that I existed. But what would I say? This is my daughter and my grandchildren who I never see. I'm part of this family too, even though I wasn't invited. It all sounded so pathetic, so desperate. One Tuesday afternoon in October, I was at the grocery store, the discount one where I'd been shopping for the past 3 years to save money. I was comparing prices on canned soup when I heard a familiar laugh. I turned, and there was Sarah, Marco, and the kids, shopping in the regular grocery store just 2 blocks from my house. They hadn't told me they were in the neighborhood. I felt frozen, my hand still on a can of chicken noodle soup. Should I call out to them? Wave? Walk over? But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way they looked so complete without me, so happy in their little unit. Maybe it was the fear of seeing that flash of annoyance cross Marco's face when he saw me. Maybe it was just exhaustion, bone-deep tiredness of always being the one reaching out, always being the one trying. I watched them for a moment. Emma was chattering excitedly about something, pulling items off shelves. Jackson was pushing the cart. Sarah was laughing at something Marco said. They looked like a magazine advertisement for the perfect family. And I was just an old woman in a discount grocery store clutching a can of soup, invisible. I left my cart in the aisle and walked out. I couldn't breathe properly. The October air was cool on my face, and I stood outside the store taking deep breaths, trying to calm the panic rising in my chest. They hadn't seen me. Or maybe they had and just hadn't acknowledged it. I didn't know which possibility was worse. That evening, Sarah texted me, "Hope you're having a good day," with a smiley face emoji. Nothing about being in my neighborhood. Nothing about the grocery store. Just that empty, cheerful message that meant nothing and hurt everything. I didn't respond for 2 hours. When I finally did, I just wrote, "You too, honey." I wanted to ask why she hadn't called, why she'd been so close and not stopped by, why I felt like a stranger to my own daughter. But I didn't, because I was afraid of the answer, or afraid there wouldn't be an answer at all. The final straw was supposed to be a family dinner, one of those rare rituals that we had held sacred over the years. I'd received a text from Sarah on a Wednesday morning. "Mom, can you host Sunday dinner this week? I'm swamped with work and the kids miss your cooking." My heart had leaped. They missed my cooking. They wanted to come over. Maybe things were getting better. Maybe I'd been wrong to doubt, to worry, to feel so hurt. I'd immediately started planning. I'd go to the good grocery store, not the discount one. I'd make Sarah's favorite pot roast, the one with the red wine gravy. I'd make Jackson's favorite chocolate cake. I'd set the table with the good china, put out fresh flowers, make the house warm and welcoming. I'd spent 2 days preparing. I'd pulled money from my coffee tin, the savings I'd been building for a new water heater because mine had been making ominous sounds. I'd spent it all on groceries, on a bouquet of mixed flowers from the florist, on a nice bottle of wine. I'd cleaned the house top to bottom, scrubbing floors, dusting surfaces that didn't need dusting, polishing windows. I'd even borrowed Mrs. Chen's steam cleaner to do the carpets. Sunday morning, I was up at dawn. I started the pot roast at 8 so it would be perfect by 5. I made fresh rolls. I set the table carefully, making sure the forks were in the right place, the glasses arranged just so. I put the flowers in the center, the yellow and white chrysanthemums that looked cheerful and autumnal. I changed my clothes 3 times, finally settling on a soft lavender sweater and gray slacks. I even put on lipstick. At 4 o'clock, the house smelled wonderful. The pot roast was perfect, tender, and rich. The rolls were golden. The cake was frosted and waiting on the counter. I'd made a salad and roasted vegetables. I'd set out appetizers, cheese and crackers, the kind Marco liked. Everything was ready. At 4:30, my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Mom, I'm so sorry, but we can't make it." The words didn't make sense at first. I stood there in my clean house, wearing my lipstick, surrounded by the smell of the dinner I'd spent 2 days preparing. "What do you mean?" I asked, and my voice sounded strange, distant. "Marco got tickets to this food festival in Brooklyn. It's a big deal, really exclusive, and he's been wanting to go for months. We just found out we could get in today. The kids are already in the car. They're so excited. But I made dinner. I made the pot roast. I made Jackson's cake." "I know, Mom, and that's so sweet. We'll definitely reschedule, okay? Maybe next weekend." "Sarah, I've been cooking for 2 days. I understand you're disappointed, but this is really important for Marco's work, networking and stuff. You get it, right?" I didn't get it. I didn't get how a food festival was more important than a family dinner. I didn't get how I'd become so unimportant that I could be canceled on with 30 minutes notice. I didn't get how my daughter could do this to me. "Sarah," I started, but she cut me off. "Mom, I really have to go. They're waiting for me. We'll talk soon, okay? Love you, bye." The line went dead. I stood there holding my phone, looking at the table I'd set so carefully. The good china with the rose pattern, the cloth napkins I'd ironed, the flowers, the candles I'd planned to light, the whole house perfect and waiting and empty. I walked slowly to the table and sat down in one of the chairs. My chair, the one I always sat in. I looked at the place settings, at the wine glasses catching the afternoon light, at the centerpiece of yellow and white chrysanthemums. I looked at the empty chairs where my daughter, my son-in-law, my grandchildren should have been sitting. And then I noticed something. My hand was shaking. I looked down and saw that I was still holding my phone in one hand, and the other hand was gripping the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles had gone white. I was shaking all over, actually, a fine tremor that started in my hands and moved through my whole body. I stood up, still shaking, and walked to the kitchen. The pot roast sat in its serving dish, perfect and steaming. The rolls were in a basket, covered with a towel to keep them warm. The vegetables glistened with olive oil and herbs. I picked up one of the good plates, the china with the roses that had been my mother's, and I just stood there holding it. And then I dropped it. Not on purpose. My hands just let go. The plate hit the kitchen floor and shattered into a dozen pieces, the sound sharp and final in the quiet house. I looked down at the broken china, at the shards spreading across the green and white checkered floor, and something in me shattered too. I sank down onto the floor, right there among the broken pieces, and I cried. Not the quiet, dignified crying I'd done before. This was something else, something raw and ugly and desperate. Great, heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest, from that place where I'd been storing all the hurt and disappointment and betrayal. I cried until my throat was raw, until my head pounded, until I didn't have any tears left. When I finally stopped, when I was just sitting there hiccuping and empty on my kitchen floor, I looked at the broken plate, really looked at it. It had been my mother's, part of a set she'd treasured. She'd given it to me when I got married, told me to take care of it, to pass it down to my daughter someday. And now it was broken, scattered across the floor in jagged pieces that could never be put back together. Just like me, I thought. Just like whatever hope I'd been holding on to that my family would value me, would see me, would remember that I mattered. I sat there for a long time. The pot roast got cold. The rolls hardened. The candles remained unlit. Eventually, when the light started to fade and the house grew dim, I carefully picked up the pieces of the broken plate, wrapped them in newspaper, and threw them away. Then I covered all the food with plastic wrap and put it in the refrigerator, knowing I'd be eating pot roast for a week, alone in this house that smelled of a family gathering that never happened. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay in bed staring at the water-stained ceiling, and I finally admitted to myself what I'd been avoiding for so long. I had to do something. I couldn't keep living like this, waiting for crumbs of affection, accepting whatever tiny scraps of attention they threw my way, pretending that this was normal or acceptable or okay. But what could I do? What power did I have? I was just an old woman living on Social Security and a small pension. I had no leverage, no way to make them treat me better. The only thing I had was my presence, my willingness to keep showing up, keep trying, keep hoping, and if I withdrew that, what then? Would they even notice? The thought terrified me, because as painful as things were, at least I had some connection to Sarah, however thin and frayed. If I pulled away, if I set boundaries or made demands or stood up for myself, I might lose even that. I might lose her completely. I might never see my grandchildren again. And even though the relationship we had now barely qualified as a relationship, it was still something. It was still more than nothing. Or was it? Was this painful half-connection actually worse than nothing? Was I holding on to something that was already gone, like clutching the broken pieces of my mother's china and pretending it was still a plate? These questions circled in my mind all night, around and around until my thoughts felt like a hamster wheel going nowhere. By morning, I'd come to no conclusions except that I was exhausted and everything hurt. Monday morning, I went to the bank. I don't know what made me do it, what impulse drove me there. But I found myself sitting in a small office with a young woman named Jennifer, whose desk had a photo of her own children, both under 5, grinning gap-toothed at the camera. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Whitman?" she asked, and her voice was kind. "I need to know about my account," I said. "I need to understand exactly what I have." She pulled up my information and walked me through it. My checking account, where my Social Security and pension were deposited. My tiny savings account that had been depleted so many times for family emergencies, family loans, family needs. The personal loan I'd taken out to give Marco that money he never returned, the one I was still paying off at $270 a month. "And this loan," Jennifer said gently, "it's in your name only, yes? If you wanted to pursue collection from someone else who received the money, you'd need documentation of the agreement." "There was no documentation," I said quietly. "It was family. You don't make your family sign papers." She nodded, and I saw something like pity in her eyes. "I understand, but from a financial standpoint, you're liable for this debt. Another—" She checked her screen. 26 months of payments. 26 more months. At 73 years old, I'd be 75 before I finished paying off Marco's debt. Money I'd given him trusting he'd pay me back. Money he'd probably spent without a second thought while I ate discount soup and skipped buying fresh fruit. "Is there anything else I should know?" Jennifer asked. "Do you have other assets, investments, a retirement fund?" I almost laughed. "My house," I said. "That's it. Just my house. And it's paid off. Robert paid it off the year before he died. It was important to him that I'd always have a place to live." Robert, always thinking of me, always trying to protect me, even from beyond the grave. What would he think if he could see me now? Would he be disappointed that I'd let things get this bad? Or would he understand that sometimes love makes you blind, makes you foolish, makes you hold on long past when you should have let go? I left the bank with printouts of my accounts, numbers in black and white that told the story of my financial life. It wasn't much. After 73 years on this earth, after working as a school secretary for 30 years, after being a wife and mother and grandmother, I had very little to show for it. But what I did have, I realized, was mine. And I needed to stop giving it away to people who didn't value it. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my old friend Margaret. We'd worked together at the elementary school, had stayed close after we both retired. But in the past few years, I'd seen her less and less. Partly because I'd been so focused on trying to maintain my relationship with Sarah and the family. Partly because I'd been ashamed to admit how things really were, how I'd let myself be pushed to the margins of my own daughter's life. "Eleanor," she said when she answered, her voice warm and surprised. "Goodness, it's been too long. How are you?" And for the first time in I don't know how long, when someone asked me how I was, I told the truth. "Not good, Margaret," I said, and my voice cracked. "Not good at all." We talked for 2 hours. I told her everything. About Marco, about Sarah's silence, about the canceled dinner and the broken plate and the military medals lost in storage, and the $12,000 I'd never see again. I told her about feeling invisible, about being excluded, about that horrible moment in the grocery store when I'd seen my family and hidden from them because I couldn't bear the possibility of being ignored. Margaret listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Eleanor," she finally said, "what you're describing is abuse. You know that, right?" "It's not abuse," I said automatically. "They don't hit me. They don't." "There are lots of kinds of abuse," Margaret interrupted. "Financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, isolation. What you're describing, sweetheart, this is textbook elder abuse." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Elder abuse. That was something that happened to other people, to the vulnerable elderly in nursing homes or with dementia. Not to me. Not to a woman who was still independent, still living in her own home, still capable. "I read something," Margaret continued, "that said only 1 in 24 cases of elder abuse gets reported. Because people don't recognize it. Because victims are ashamed. Because they don't want to admit that their own family would do this to them. Eleanor, you're not alone in this, and you don't have to accept it." After we hung up, I sat with those words. You don't have to accept it. Such a simple statement, but it felt revolutionary. I'd been so focused on what I might lose if I stood up for myself that I hadn't considered what I might gain. Dignity, self-respect, peace. That evening, I made a decision. Actually, several decisions. First, I was going to stop giving money. No more loans. No more investments. No more helping out with things they should be handling themselves. My money was mine, and I'd earned it through decades of work. I owed it to Robert's memory and to my own future to stop hemorrhaging funds to people who didn't appreciate the sacrifice. Second, I was going to stop being available at their convenience. No more dropping everything when they called. No more accepting last-minute plans and last-minute cancellations. My time had value too, even if they didn't recognize it. Third, and this was the hardest, I was going to start building a life that didn't revolve around waiting for them to include me. I was going to reconnect with friends like Margaret. I was going to do things I enjoyed. I was going to remember that I was a person, not just someone's mother or grandmother. I slept better that night than I had in months. Not perfectly. Old habits and old fears don't disappear overnight, but better. And when I woke up Tuesday morning, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite hope, but something close to it. Determination, maybe. Or just the smallest glimmer of belief that things could be different. "Wednesday afternoon," Sarah called. "Hey, Mom, random question. Can you watch Emma and Jackson this Saturday? We want to go to this wine tasting thing Marco found." In the past, I would have said yes immediately, would have been grateful for the chance to see my grandchildren, would have rearranged any plans I might have had. But this time, I paused. "Actually, Sarah, I have plans Saturday." "Oh." She sounded surprised. Well, what about Sunday? I have plans Sunday, too. This was a lie. My plans were to sit in my house and read the book I'd been trying to finish for 3 months. But they were still plans, and they were mine. Mom, seriously? We really need this. Can't you reschedule? No, I said, and the word felt strange in my mouth. When was the last time I'd said no to Sarah? I can't. You'll need to find someone else. But, I'm sorry, honey, but I really do have commitments. I hope you find someone. Talk soon. Bye. I hung up before she could respond, before I could hear the disappointment or irritation in her voice, before I could lose my nerve and take it back. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from despair. It was adrenaline, fear, and exhilaration mixed together in equal measure. She didn't call back. I waited all afternoon, jumping every time my phone made a sound. But it was just emails, just spam calls, just nothing. She didn't call back to argue or to understand or to ask why I suddenly had plans when I was usually free. She just found someone else, presumably, and moved on. And that hurt too, in its way, because it confirmed what I'd suspected. I was interchangeable, convenient when available, but easily replaced when not. But it also freed something in me. If I was that easily replaced, then maybe my absence wouldn't shatter their world the way I'd feared. Maybe they'd barely notice. Over the next few weeks, I started making real plans. I called Margaret, and we started having lunch every Tuesday at the diner on Queens Boulevard, the one with the good French fries and the waitress who always remembered we both liked our coffee black. I went to the senior center and signed up for a watercolor painting class, something I'd wanted to try for years, but had never made time for. I volunteered to help with the church's community meals program, serving food to people who were struggling, which gave me perspective on my own situation. I also started seeing a therapist. My doctor had given me the name months ago, but I'd never called, telling myself I didn't need it, I could handle things on my own. But I made the appointment, and every Thursday at 2 I sat in Dr. Chen's office, no relation to my neighbor with the roses, she told me with a smile. And I talked. I talked about Robert and how much I missed him. I talked about the guilt I felt for being angry at Sarah, because wasn't she entitled to live her own life? I talked about Marco and how he'd slowly poisoned my relationship with my daughter. I talked about feeling invisible, about the shame of being treated poorly by your own child, about the fear of dying alone and forgotten. Dr. Chen listened and asked questions and gave me tools for setting boundaries. She helped me understand that loving someone didn't mean accepting mistreatment, that being a good mother didn't require being a doormat, that I deserved respect and kindness from the people I'd sacrificed so much for. But she also prepared me for the possibility that when I started setting boundaries, Sarah and Marco might not respond well, that they might push back, might try to make me feel guilty, might even escalate their bad behavior before they accepted the new reality. Some people, Dr. Chen said gently, don't want you to grow a backbone, because your lack of boundaries benefits them. When you start standing up for yourself, they'll resist. You need to be ready for that. I thought I was ready. I thought I understood. I didn't. It was a Thursday evening in November when everything came to a head. I'd been maintaining my new boundaries for about 3 weeks. I'd said no to 2 more babysitting requests. I'd been unavailable for a last-minute favor involving picking up dry cleaning. I'd declined to contribute to a family fund Marco was starting for reasons he wouldn't clearly explain. I was being polite but firm, just like Dr. Chen had coached me. Then I got a text from Sarah, not asking this time, telling, "Mom, we're having Thanksgiving at our place this year. You're coming, right? Marco's parents will be there too. November 24th, 3 p.m. I stared at that text for a long time. We're having it at our place. Marco's parents will be there. You're coming, right? Not, would you like to come? Not, we'd love to have you. Just the assumption that I'd show up, that I'd be grateful to be included in a holiday at my own daughter's home, sharing a table with Marco's parents who I barely knew. Last year, I'd hosted Thanksgiving. I'd cooked for 2 days. Marco had spent the meal on his phone and complained about the turkey. I took a deep breath and typed, "What time should I bring the food?" Her response came quickly, Oh, no need to bring anything. We're having it catered. Just bring yourself. Just bring myself. Don't cook. Don't contribute. Just show up and be grateful to be allowed in the room. Something in me snapped. I called her. She answered on the fourth ring, and I could hear noise in the background, the kids arguing, the TV on. Mom, can't really talk. We're about to sit down for dinner. This won't take long, I said, and my voice sounded calm, steadier than I felt. I'm not coming to Thanksgiving. Silence. Then, what? I said I'm not coming. I have other plans. Mom, are you serious? It's Thanksgiving. It's family. Yes, I said. It's family, and family should treat each other with respect and consideration. They should value each other's time and contributions. They should act like they actually want you there, not like they're checking off an obligation. What are you talking about? Of course we want you there. Do you, Sarah? Do you really? Or do you want me there because it looks good, because it's what you're supposed to do? When was the last time you actually wanted to spend time with me? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't rushed or distracted? When was the last time you asked how I was and actually waited to hear the answer? More silence. Then, her voice tight. Is this about the Sunday dinner we missed? Mom, I apologized for that. Marco had an opportunity. Marco, I interrupted, and I heard my voice rising, heard the emotion breaking through. It's always about Marco. Marco's opportunities, Marco's needs, Marco's wants. What about me, Sarah? What about your mother? The woman who raised you, who paid for your wedding, who gave your husband $12,000 that I'm still paying off. That was a loan, Sarah said, defensive. Marco said it was a gift. Or at least that's what he told me when I asked for it back. Did you know that? Did you know your husband took $12,000 from your mother and then gaslighted her when she asked for it back? I'm sure there was a misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. Sarah, open your eyes. He's been disrespectful to me for years. He's been slowly cutting me out of your life, making me feel small and stupid and unwelcome. And you've let him. You've stood by and watched him treat me like garbage, and you've done nothing. That's not fair. Her voice was cold now. Marco has been nothing but good to this family. He works hard. He provides. With my money, I was shouting now, tears streaming down my face. He provides with my money. Money I gave him because I trusted him. Money I gave him because you asked me to. And I've never seen a penny back. Do you know I shop at the discount grocery store now because I can't afford the regular one? Do you know I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years? Do you know I had to borrow a steam cleaner from my neighbor because I can't afford to buy one or hire someone to clean the carpets? All while Marco opens restaurants and takes wine-tasting trips and goes to exclusive food festivals. Mom, if you needed money, you should have said something. I shouldn't have to beg my own daughter to treat me with basic decency. I shouldn't have to remind you that I exist. I shouldn't have to fight for a place in your life. I was sobbing now, all the pain and anger and hurt of the past 5 years pouring out. I heard Sarah crying too, but I couldn't stop. You canceled on a dinner I spent 2 days preparing with 30 minutes notice. You borrowed Robert's military medals and lost them. You've excluded me from family events over and over. You shop in my neighborhood and don't stop by. You post pictures of family gatherings I wasn't invited to. You treat me like an inconvenience, like an obligation, like someone you tolerate rather than someone you love. Mom, please, no. I'm done. I'm done accepting scraps. I'm done pretending that this is okay. I'm done sacrificing my dignity and my peace for people who don't value me. I won't be coming to Thanksgiving. I won't be coming to Christmas. I won't be available for last-minute babysitting or convenient favors. Not until things change. Not until you and Marco learn to treat me like I matter. You're being unreasonable, Sarah said, and her voice had shifted from upset to angry. You're being dramatic. This is exactly what Marco said you'd do. Try to manipulate us. Try to make us feel guilty. I hung up. I actually hung up on my daughter. I'd never done that before. I sat there on my couch, phone in my trembling hand, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. But underneath the pain, underneath the fear and the grief, there was something else. something that felt like freedom. The phone rang immediately. Sarah calling back. I didn't answer. It rang again and again, 7 times in a row. Then the text started. Mom, answer your phone. We need to talk about this. You're overreacting. Marco is really hurt by what you said. The kids are asking why Grandma is being mean. That last one nearly broke me. The kids are asking why Grandma is being mean, making me the villain, making my boundary setting into cruelty. It was so perfectly manipulative, so precisely designed to make me feel guilty, that I almost called her back, almost apologized, almost took it all back. But I didn't. I turned my phone off and sat in the quiet of my house, crying until I had no tears left. The next day, Friday, I woke up with swollen eyes and a headache. I made my tea and sat at my table and wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. What if Sarah never spoke to me again? What if I never saw Emma and Jackson? What if I'd just destroyed the only family I had over pride and hurt feelings? But then I thought about that canceled Sunday dinner, about the broken china plate on my floor, about years of feeling invisible and unimportant and used, and I knew I hadn't made a mistake. I'd finally stood up for myself. Dr. Chen had warned me this would be hard. She'd told me that when you change the dynamic of a relationship, the other person often escalates before they accept the change. They'll test you, she'd said. They'll push to see if you really mean it. You have to stay firm. That afternoon, there was a knock on my door. My stomach dropped. I looked through the peephole and saw Sarah standing on my porch, arms crossed, face tight. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. We need to talk, she said. Okay. Can I come in? I'd prefer if we talked here. She looked taken aback, then angry. Seriously? You won't even let me in your house? Sarah, every time you've been in my house recently, it's been because you needed something. I'd like to have this conversation on neutral ground. The porch is fine. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Maybe she didn't. I barely recognized myself. Fine, she said, her voice clipped. I came to tell you that you hurt Marco's feelings yesterday. He's genuinely hurt that you would accuse him of stealing from you. I didn't say he stole. I said he borrowed money and didn't return it. That's practically the same thing. No, it's not. But the fact that you're more concerned about his feelings than mine tells me everything I need to know. That's not... She stopped, took a breath. Mom, I don't understand what's happening. Where is this coming from? You've never acted like this before. I've never stood up for myself before, I said quietly. There's a difference. This is about the Sunday dinner, isn't it? I told you I was sorry. Marco had an opportunity. Stop, I said, and she blinked. Stop making excuses for him. Stop prioritizing his opportunities over basic respect for me. Sarah, look at me. Really look at me. When was the last time you actually saw me? When was the last time you asked about my life, my health, my happiness? When was the last time you treated me like a person instead of a resource you could use when convenient? That's not. I don't do that. You do. You have been for years. And I let you because I was afraid of losing you. But I've realized something. I've already lost you. Or maybe I never really had you. Not the way a mother should have her daughter. All I have is this half-relationship where I'm allowed to exist on the margins of your life, where I'm tolerated but not valued. You're my mother. Of course you're valued. Then show me. Show me with actions, not words. Treat me with respect. Keep your commitments to me. Stop letting your husband disrespect me in your presence. Stop using me for money and babysitting and then excluding me from actual family events. Show me that I matter. Sarah's face was red, tears streaming down her cheeks. I can't believe you're doing this. Right before Thanksgiving. The kids are going to be devastated. Then bring them by to see me, on a day that's not a holiday, just to visit, just because you want them to know their grandmother. But don't use them as emotional leverage. Don't make me the villain because I'm finally asking to be treated with basic human decency. Marco's parents are going to be there. What am I supposed to tell them about why you're not coming? Tell them the truth. Tell them I'm not coming because I'm not welcome. Not really. I'm just expected. There's a difference. You are welcome. God, Mom, you're so dramatic. Sarah, I said, and my voice broke. If I were truly welcome, you would have asked me to help cook. You would have called to plan the menu together. You would have made me feel like my presence was desired, not just tolerated. But instead, you told me it was catered and to just bring myself, like I'm a guest, in my own family. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or shame. But then it was gone, replaced by defensiveness. Fine, she said, her voice hard. If that's how you feel, then don't come. Stay here by yourself. See if I care. She turned and walked back to her car, a new SUV I didn't recognize, probably bought with Marco's mysterious income. She didn't look back. I went inside and closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. I'd done it. I'd stood my ground. But God, it hurt. It hurt so much. That evening, Margaret called to check on me. I told her what had happened, and she was quiet for a long moment. Eleanor, I'm proud of you, she finally said. I know it doesn't feel good right now, but you did the right thing. Did I? I might have just lost my daughter. No, honey, you just stopped letting her treat you badly. That's different. And if she can't see that, if she can't rise to meet you with respect and love, then she was already lost. You were just too afraid to admit it. I cried again that night, but differently, not the desperate, broken crying of before. This was grief, pure and simple. Grief for the relationship I'd wanted with Sarah. Grief for the mother-daughter bond I'd thought we had, but maybe never really did. Grief for the time I'd wasted trying to force something that couldn't be forced. But underneath the grief, there was something else. Something that felt like solid ground under my feet for the first time in years. Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it with Margaret and her daughter's family, which she'd invited me to join weeks earlier. It was warm and chaotic and inclusive, and when Margaret's daughter asked me to help mash the potatoes, I found myself crying over the bowl because such a simple gesture, being asked to help, being made to feel useful and wanted, meant so much. I thought about Sarah all day, wondered if she missed me, wondered if she'd told Marco's parents why I wasn't there, wondered if Emma and Jackson had asked about me. But I didn't reach out. Dr. Chen had been clear. I'd set a boundary, and now I needed to hold it. If Sarah wanted to repair our relationship, she needed to take the first step. Days turned into weeks. November became December. Sarah didn't call. I saw on Facebook that they'd gone to Rockefeller Center to see the Christmas tree, that Marco had been featured in a local food blog, that Emma had won a spelling bee. Life went on for them, apparently without missing me. It hurt. But it also clarified something. If they could go weeks without reaching out, if they could live their lives completely unaffected by my absence, then I truly had been nothing more than a convenience to them, a resource, an ATM, and a babysitter who was easily replaced. I threw myself into my new life. I painted watercolors of Mrs. Chen's roses. I volunteered at the church twice a week. I had lunch with Margaret every Tuesday and started a book club with 3 other women from the senior center. I took a day trip to the beach, something I hadn't done in years. I bought myself a new winter coat with the money I'd been saving because I deserved to be warm. And slowly, painfully, I started to feel like myself again. Not the self I'd been before Marco, but a new self, stronger, clearer, less willing to accept being diminished. It was December 18th, exactly 3 weeks before my 74th birthday, when everything changed again. I was at the grocery store, the regular one, not the discount one, because I'd started allowing myself that small luxury, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. Eleanor Whitman, a man's voice asked. Yes? This is Detective James Morrison with the NYPD Financial Crimes Unit. I need to ask you some questions about a loan you provided to Marco Delgado. My blood ran cold. What's this about? Mr. Delgado is being investigated for investment fraud. We have evidence that he's been running a scheme where he solicits loans from multiple individuals for fake business opportunities, then uses the money for personal expenses. Your name came up in our investigation. Did you provide him with any money? I stood there in the produce section, surrounded by pyramids of oranges and apples, and told a police detective about the $12,000. About how Marco had promised it was an investment, how he'd said he'd pay me back with interest, how he'd later claimed it was a gift. Mrs. Whitman, you're the fourth person who's told me almost the exact same story. Were you aware that Mr. Delgado has borrowed over $150,000 from various family members and acquaintances over the past 3 years? $150,000. I felt dizzy. My $12,000 was just one small piece of a much larger con. Do you have any documentation of this loan? Detective Morrison asked. No, it was family. I trusted him. I understand. Unfortunately, without documentation, it's going to be difficult to recover your money, but your testimony could help us build a case against him. Would you be willing to make a formal statement? Would I? I thought about Sarah, about how this would affect her, about Emma and Jackson, about the fallout of exposing Marco for what he was. Then I thought about Mrs. Rodriguez from my church, who I'd heard mentioning that she'd loaned her nephew money for a business. About old Mr. Patterson, who lived 3 houses down, who'd been talking about an investment opportunity someone had told him about. How many other people had Marco conned? How many other families had he hurt? Yes, I said. I'll make a statement. I met with Detective Morrison the next day. I told him everything. About the loan, about Marco's promises, about how he'd manipulated me, made me feel guilty for asking for my money back. I signed papers, I answered questions, and I walked out of that police station feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power. I had power, my testimony mattered, my voice counted for something. 3 days later, on December 21st, Sarah called. Not texted, actually called. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Mom. Her voice was wrecked, broken. Mom, they arrested Marco. I know. Silence. Then, you knew? How did you? I could hear her brain working, making the connections. You talked to them. You talked to the police about him. Yes. How could you? He's my husband. He's the father of my children. He's a con artist who stole from me and dozens of other people, I said, my voice steady. He's a liar and a manipulator. And yes, I talked to the police, because someone needed to stop him before he hurt more people. You've ruined everything. The kids are crying. I'm going to lose the house. His family is threatening to sue. Sarah, I interrupted, do you hear yourself? You're not angry that your husband is a criminal. You're angry that he got caught. You're not concerned that he lied to you, to me, to everyone. You're upset about the consequences. He said it was a misunderstanding. He said the police have it wrong. He lied to you too, Sarah. He's been lying to you for years. Did you know he borrowed over $150,000 from people? Did you know he's been running this scam the entire time you've been married? More silence, then quietly. No. I didn't think so. Sarah, I'm sorry you're going through this. I truly am. But I'm not sorry I told the truth. And I'm not sorry I finally stood up for myself and for all the other people he's hurt. I can't believe you do this to me. I didn't do this to you. Marco did this to you. He did it to himself. I just refused to keep his secret. She hung up on me. I sat there holding my phone, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Guilt, because Sarah was suffering. Relief, because the truth was finally out. Sadness, because this would likely end whatever was left of our relationship. And underneath it all, something that felt like righteousness. I'd done the right thing, even though it was hard. The next few weeks were chaos. Marco was released on bail, but facing multiple felony charges. Sarah had to hire a lawyer. The house went into foreclosure. Sarah's Facebook became a stream of vague posts about being attacked by people who don't understand, and staying strong through trials. Some people rallied around her. Others, presumably the ones Marco had also conned, did not. It was messy and public and painful. On Christmas Eve, I got a message from Emma, my 13-year-old granddaughter, who I hadn't heard from in months. "Grandma, I know Mom is mad at you, but I just wanted to say I miss you, and I'm sorry about everything. Can I come visit you sometime?" I cried reading that message. Real, healing tears. Because Emma saw me. Emma missed me. Emma wanted a relationship with me that wasn't dependent on her parents' approval. I wrote back, "I miss you too, sweetheart, so much. Yes, you can visit any time. I love you." She replied with a heart emoji. It wasn't everything, but it was something. It was a thread of connection, thin but real, that gave me hope. January arrived, a new year, 2025. I was 74 years old, living alone in Queens, estranged from my daughter, waiting for a trial where I'd have to testify against my son-in-law. By any objective measure, my life was a mess. But I woke up every morning without that tight knot of anxiety in my chest. I ate my breakfast without wondering when the next rejection would come. I made plans without fear of having them canceled. I lived my life on my terms. And yes, it was lonely sometimes, but it was mine. Margaret threw me a birthday party in February, just a small gathering at her house, her daughter's family, a few friends from church, the women from book club. We had cake and champagne, and everyone sang off-key. It was simple and warm and genuine, and I realized this was what family should feel like. People who chose to be there. People who celebrated you without it being an obligation. In March, Emma came to visit. Sarah had reluctantly agreed, probably because she needed me to babysit while she dealt with lawyers and financial mess. I didn't care about her motives. I got 3 hours with my granddaughter, and we made cookies and talked about school and her friends and her art class. She didn't mention Marco or the arrest or her mother's anger at me. We just existed together in the moment, and it was perfect. "Grandma," she said as we were cleaning up flour from the kitchen counter, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Why did you tell the police about Dad? About Marco?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Because he did something wrong, Emma. He lied to people and took their money. And I had a choice. I could keep quiet and let him keep hurting people, or I could tell the truth even though it would be hard. I chose the truth." She nodded, thinking about this. "Mom says you betrayed us." I know she feels that way, and I understand why it's hard for her. But Emma, sometimes doing the right thing means people you love will be angry with you. That doesn't make it less right. I think. She paused, then continued. "I think you were brave. It must have been really hard." I pulled her into a hug, this tall, thoughtful girl who was becoming a young woman. "Thank you for understanding. That means more to me than you know." When Sarah picked Emma up, she barely looked at me, didn't come to the door, just texted that she was outside. Emma gave me one last hug and whispered, "I'll text you, Grandma. I promise." And she did. We started a regular text conversation. Nothing deep, pictures of her artwork, funny memes, questions about Robert and what I was like when I was young. But it was connection, and I treasured every message. The trial was scheduled for May. As the date approached, I felt nervous but resolute. Detective Morrison had kept me updated. There were now 11 people making statements against Marco. The evidence was overwhelming. Sarah sent me one message 3 days before the trial. "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed my family." I didn't respond. There was nothing I could say that would make her understand. The trial lasted 3 days. I testified on day 2. I sat in that witness box and told the truth about the loan, about Marco's promises, about how he'd made me feel guilty for asking for my own money back. I didn't embellish or exaggerate. I just told the truth. Marco's lawyer tried to paint me as a bitter old woman with a grudge, but the prosecutor had my bank records, my loan documents, the timeline of payments I'd made while Marco lived large. The numbers didn't lie. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I caught Sarah's eye. She was sitting in the gallery, and the look she gave me was pure hatred. It hurt, God, it hurt, but I didn't look away. I'd done what I needed to do. Marco was convicted on 8 counts of fraud, sentenced to 6 years in federal prison, ordered to pay restitution, though the prosecutor warned us most of the money was gone, spent on his lifestyle and his failed restaurant ventures. I'd never see my $12,000 again, but I'd see justice done, and that counted for something. After the trial, I went home to my quiet house and made myself a cup of tea. I sat at my kitchen table, the one with the wobbling chair I still hadn't fixed, and I let myself feel all of it. The grief, the relief, the complicated, messy emotions of having done the right thing at a terrible cost. And then I called Emma. "Hey, Grandma," she answered, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Hey, sweetheart. I just wanted to hear your voice. The trial's over, right? I saw Mom crying when she came home." "Yes, it's over. Are you okay?" When was the last time someone had asked me that and meant it? "I think I am. Not happy exactly, but okay." "Good. Hey, can I come visit this weekend? I want to show you my art portfolio." "I'd love that." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my house and realized something. I'd survived. I'd lost my daughter, maybe permanently. I'd lost money I'd never recover. I'd been rejected and accused and hated. But I'd survived. And more than that, I'd reclaimed something I'd lost years ago. My dignity, my self-respect, my sense that I mattered, that I had worth beyond what I could provide for others. Summer came. I turned 74. Margaret threw me another party. Emma came and brought a painting she'd made for me, a watercolor of roses inspired by the ones I'd been painting from Mrs. Chen's garden. I hung it in my living room where Robert's medals used to be, and every time I looked at it, I felt a warmth in my chest. Sarah didn't call on my birthday. I'd stopped expecting her to. But 3 days later, I got a letter. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter delivered by mail. I opened it with shaking hands. "Mom," it began, "I don't know how to write this. I've started this letter a dozen times and thrown them all away. But I need to try. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the trial, since Marco went to prison, since I had to admit to myself that everything you said was true. He lied to me. He used you, he used everyone, and I didn't want to see it because seeing it would mean admitting I'd made a terrible mistake. I'm in therapy now. Court-ordered at first, because of some financial stuff, but I'm continuing because I need it. And my therapist has been making me look at things I've avoided looking at for a long time, like how I treated you, how I let Marco treat you, how I prioritized his feelings and his needs over my own mother, how I took you for granted, used you for money and babysitting, and then pushed you aside when you weren't convenient. I told myself I was just busy, just focused on my family, just trying to keep everyone happy. But the truth is, I was selfish. I was willing to let you be hurt as long as it made my life easier. And I'm ashamed of that. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't know if I deserve that. But I needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see what he did. And I'm sorry. Emma talks about you all the time. She shows me the texts you send her, the pictures you share. She says you're teaching her to paint. She says you actually listen when she talks. She says she wishes I was more like you. That about killed me, Mom. My own daughter wishing I was more like her grandmother. But she's right. You gave me everything, and I gave you nothing back. You loved me unconditionally, and I made my love conditional on whether you were useful to me. I don't expect you to want a relationship with me anymore. I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see me again. But I needed to tell you this. You were right. About all of it. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Love, Sarah. I read that letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't everything. It didn't fix years of hurt, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was the beginning of understanding. I didn't respond right away. I sat with the letter for a week, reading it every morning with my tea, thinking about what I wanted, what I needed, what was possible. Finally, I wrote back. Also by hand, also on paper, because some things are too important for quick digital communication. Dear Sarah, I wrote, thank you for your letter. It meant more to me than you can know. I don't know what our relationship looks like going forward. I don't know if we can rebuild what was broken or if we need to build something new. But I'm willing to try, if you are. But I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was. I won't accept being treated as less than. I won't be convenient when it suits you and invisible when it doesn't. I won't be taken for granted or used or dismissed. If we're going to have a relationship, it needs to be real. It needs to be based on mutual respect and genuine love, not obligation or guilt. Can we do that? I don't know, but I'm willing to find out if you are. I love you. I've always loved you. But I love myself too now, and I won't give that up. Not for anyone. Mom. I mailed it and waited. 2 weeks later, Sarah called. We talked for an hour. Really talked, honestly, painfully. She told me about the financial disaster Marco had left her with, about having to sell the house, about moving back to a modest apartment. I told her about my watercolor classes, about the book club, about the life I'd built. We didn't solve everything in one conversation. But it was a start, a real start. Over the following months, we began to rebuild, slowly, carefully. Sarah came to my house for dinner, and this time, she helped cook. We fell back into old rhythms, but different now. We were equals, not mother and child, not user and used. Just two women trying to figure out how to be family. It wasn't perfect. There were hard conversations. There were moments when old patterns tried to reassert themselves, and I had to gently but firmly redirect. There were times when Sarah got defensive, and I had to decide whether to push or let it go. But it was real. And that made all the difference. One Sunday in October, almost a year after everything fell apart, Sarah and I took Emma and Jackson to the park. It was one of those perfect autumn days, the kind Robert used to love, with crisp air and leaves in every shade of gold and red. We sat on a bench while the kids played, and Sarah said, "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For not giving up. On yourself, I mean. I wanted you to. It would have been easier for me if you'd just kept accepting everything, kept being the person I could take advantage of. But you didn't. You stood up for yourself. And even though it was hard, even though it hurt, it was what I needed to see." I took her hand. I almost didn't. I was so scared of losing you. You wouldn't have been losing me. You'd already lost me. I'd lost myself. We both needed to find our way back. I looked at my grandchildren, laughing and running in the fallen leaves, at my daughter beside me, older and wiser and more honest than she'd been a year ago, at the life that had emerged from the ashes of the old one. "Mom," Sarah said quietly, "I know I can never really make up for what I did, for what I let happen. But I want you to know, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the daughter you deserved all along." I squeezed her hand. "Just be present. That's all I need. Just be here, really here, and we'll figure out the rest." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat like that, watching the kids play, feeling the autumn sun warm on our faces. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no dramatic reconciliation scene, no moment where everything was suddenly perfect. But it was real, it was honest. And after years of living in the shadow of someone else's needs and wants, after years of making myself smaller to make room for others, after years of accepting crumbs and calling it love, this felt like a feast. I'm 75 now, my knees still creak. My back still hurts. I still take 7 pills every morning and drink my Earl Grey from a chipped mug. Mrs. Chen's roses still bloom red outside my window. But I'm different. I know my worth now. I know that love shouldn't diminish you, that family should lift you up, not tear you down. I know that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. I know that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept being treated badly. I volunteer 3 times a week now. I paint watercolors. I have lunch with Margaret every Tuesday without fail. I have a relationship with my grandchildren that's based on genuine affection, not obligation. And I have a slowly healing relationship with my daughter that's built on truth instead of convenience. It's not the life I imagined at 75. It's better because it's mine. Really, truly mine. Research shows that elder abuse affects millions of people worldwide. Financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, neglect. These aren't rare occurrences. They're common, insidious, and often invisible. Most victims never report it, never speak up, never fight back. They suffer in silence, thinking they're alone, thinking they somehow deserve it, thinking they have no power to change their situation. But you do have power. You have the power to say no. You have the power to set boundaries. You have the power to demand respect. And you have the power to walk away from relationships that diminish you, even if, especially if, those relationships are with family. It won't be easy. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. You might lose people you love. You might face anger and accusations and attempts to make you feel guilty. But on the other side of that pain is something precious, your dignity, your peace, and the knowledge that you refused to let anyone make you less than you are. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're being used or manipulated or taken for granted by people who should love you, please know, you don't have to accept it. You deserve better. You deserve respect and kindness and genuine love. And if the people in your life can't or won't give you that, you deserve the freedom to build a life without them. It's never too late. At 73, I thought my life was settled, that my patterns were fixed, that I was too old to change. I was wrong. Change is possible at any age. Growth is possible. Transformation is possible. You just have to be brave enough to choose yourself. So here's what I want you to take away from my story. Your worth is not determined by how useful you are to others. Your value doesn't come from what you can provide or sacrifice or endure. You matter. Your feelings matter. Your needs matter. Your life matters. And if the people around you can't see that, if they can't treat you with basic human decency, that's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their character. Stand up for yourself. Set boundaries. Say no. Walk away if you need to. And know that somewhere out there, there's a 75-year-old woman in Queens who did all those things and survived. Who not only survived, but thrived. Who found peace and purpose and genuine connection on the other side of all that pain. If I can do it, so can you. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation like mine? Have you experienced being taken for granted or manipulated by family? Have you watched someone you love go through this kind of struggle? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. And if my story helped you in any way, if it gave you courage or clarity, or just the comfort of knowing someone else understands, please consider subscribing. Let's make sure this message reaches someone else who needs to hear it. Someone who's sitting alone right now, wondering if things will ever get better. They can, they will, but sometimes we all need a reminder that we're worth fighting for.